Hi everybody, and welcome back to my channel, or thank you for joining us if this is your first time. My name is Leanna, and we are here to do a peer-to-peer support group, give you some coping skills, maybe just listen to the stories, take away what you need, leave what you don't, but somehow we'll all get through this. So, I've been promised you we're going to talk about guilt and shame regarding suicide. That tends to be a very big topic, and I think some of my podcasts are already a little long in the tooth. So tonight we're going to talk about guilt, and I'm going to go over a few points that I found out, and then we're going to jump into how some of these have affected my experience with suicide loss and how they've impacted some of my stories. So, survivor's guilt. Now, the biggest problem with survivor's guilt is there is not a lot of self-forgiveness. And I attested there is, in mine, there's almost no self-forgiveness. People who do not have self-forgiveness are more highly depressed. They have suicide ideation compared to some of the other bereavements like cancer. Diabetes is still taking people away. Any of those health concerns, because this is a health concern. I know it's a social concern and everything, but it still is a health concern. So 800,000 people year-wide commit suicide. Not a big number compared to the population of the world. 60 people are impacted directly from every suicide. So if I were to kill myself tonight, there would be another 60 people affected just from my suicide. That may seem a little large to most of you. It did seem a little large to me at the beginning. But you're not aware, we're rarely aware of how many people's lives that we impact. And it may not be a person that you had daily conversations with or knew very personal, shared intimate details about your life with anyone else, but somebody who meant something to you that you weren't aware of, and it happens. So that would bring us to a total of 480 to 500 million people who are affected by suicide each year. And that is a number that is better recognized on a worldwide level than 800,000. Suicide loss survivors are more vulnerable to psychopathology, including depression, post-traumatic stress disorder, high anxiety, complicated grief. We tend to hold on to our feelings and keep them inside rather than sharing with them. And I'll get into that one too. Suicide loss survivors, SLS, differ in the content of their guilt, the way they identify the content of their grief. There's a lot of shame, there's a lot of stigma, which leads a lot of people to just not deal with society, or to deal with society less, or to hide, rename, or cover up the cause of death for the person that committed suicide. Sometimes it's easier, and I have experienced that all the time. No sooner the words fly out of my mouth than I'm comforting somebody who probably doesn't really have a strong relationship with me. But with that, get into my story a little bit. So my brother committed suicide 20 years ago. And I think my biggest hurdle for the last 20 years in getting over the death of him is the guilt. There's a lot of guilt that I was harboring, and some that I still do harbor. I blamed myself for the entirety of what he had done. And I also blame myself. We didn't find him for 10 days, so I also blame myself for not being more involved with him to know that um, he's going to do something like that. That didn't ever cross my mind. Um, yeah, big shock. Um, my brother and I had a very complicated relationship. We were very enmeshed. Um, we were very enmeshed with each other. Um, it was basically him and I against the world. Um, and there were things, he had learning disabilities and whatnot. But anyways, I took great care of him. Um, I had a lot of responsibility for him. I never was ever going to leave him alone. My husband and I went to look at houses. Every time we did, I made sure that there was a place for my brother to come and live with us and still have his own space, but still be part of the family when my mom and my grandmother passed away. That's probably something I should have made him a little more aware of, but it was something that I knew that I was going to do. Now, the guilt is that leading up to his, we'll quickly go through his whole life here, but leading up to his suicide, I had always been the one who had done everything for him. I was the one that signed the birthday card to my dad from him, got the gift, included his name. Christmas with my nan, same sort of thing. Just little things, but I was always there. If he was fighting with my mother, I would go over to the house if I'd moved out by then and have a word with her. And they're just always trying to make him happier and take away whatever's bothering him from him. Just prior to his suicide, I gave birth to my third child, a boy, just before Christmas there. And there was an incident in the hallway with my brother and my dad, and I'll expand on that later because that doesn't really deal with my guilt right now. But anyways, there's a little bit of an issue there, and my brother was very solemn when he came into the room and to meet my son. I noticed right away, and I said, "Would you like to pick the baby up?" And he said, "No, I don't want to." I said, "Okay." Well, how are things? Trying to start a conversation because he's pretty much stonewalled at this point. And I just remember him saying, "I just saw Dad in the hall." And I said, "Yeah, they just left here." And he goes, "Yeah." He goes, he didn't even notice me, Lee. He didn't notice me at all. Now, in fairness, they had not seen each other in quite some time. However, in fairness to my brother, he hadn't changed. So, anyways, that struck me as odd, but it gave me a better understanding to where he was and why he just didn't want to deal with anything or, be in a happy mood. So that's fine. When he did commit suicide, and I said this right from day one. I said, "Oh my God, this is all my fault. I left him alone with no coping skills to deal with a raging alcoholic of a mother, a grandmother who was slipping quickly into dementia, not a great job, not a whole lot going on in his life that would make him have hopes for the future, be able to look forward enough to see something changing." And I kind of blame myself for that because I never let him work through that coping skill. I always jumped in and did everything for him. So, so when he passed away, I'm like, I left him there with no coping skills. What did I expect was going to happen? He was all of a sudden going to understand everything that's going on. 30 years I've been doing this. And that was my guilt. And I held that so close to my heart and my soul. And it's toxic. You can't do that. You just really can't do that. I had a really hard time functioning. after his death, after his suicide. I was scheduled to go back to work when my son was a year old. I was nowhere near ready. I have, at this point, it's been 20 years, I have not returned to work. Um, it just gets in your head, and you just don't know what to do with all of your feelings. You know, why did he do this? Why didn't he talk to me first? Why didn't he just call me? You know, I could have fixed everything like I usually do. I could have fixed it all. Is this because he was mad at me? Does this have anything to do with me? Is this like F you? Because now you got your own family and whatever, and we're not even worthy of being looked after or whatever. I don't know, whatever it was. A lot of things just went on in my head, and most people couldn't understand it because they didn't understand what the dynamic was between my brother and I. I have a cousin out on the East Coast who I spoke with the day after we found him, and I've never let this go. I've only actually contacted her recently about it. Um, she was probably the best call out of every call that I got that day, and I cried, and she could hear me and everything. And she said, "I know you're nursing the baby, but there's formula. Go get yourself on some pills or something. Like, you got to take care of you. You got to be there for your 3 kids. You can't just fall apart right now." She goes, "But I can see, like, this must be horrible for you. You almost raised him. This must be like losing a son to you." That always stuck with me because my nan and I, we lived at the house. We were with him on a daily basis. We always thought that. We didn't think anybody else noticed. So the fact that somebody just came right out and said it to me, a family member no less, was quite, it was a little bit empowering for me somehow. Is that I was able to let go a little bit better because I was able to say, you know what, you're not my son. I can't grieve you like you are my son. Because if anything were to happen to my son, God help me, I would not survive. Absolutely could not survive. I don't know how people do it when they're missing a child for any reason. It doesn't work. And then there's a lot of guilt because he left a daughter behind. Later on, we found out he left 2 daughters behind. We're in contact with both of them. They're in contact with each other, so that's great. And every time, I went to Suicide Survivors Group twice. I did bereavement counseling, just general bereavement counseling. I did every other kind of counseling. None of it was taking the guilt away. I stood firm on it was my fault. I could have stopped it. I could have fixed this. What kind of a person am I that I didn't even see this coming? So this is where our little website there gets into what they call self-forgiveness. Self-forgiveness is one of the toughest struggles in any form of bereavement, but most solely ours. It is crucial to our survival to forgive ourselves and not take this on. It's almost paramount. You cannot recover if you are not going to forgive yourself. And they kind of feel that adopting some of the self-forgiveness elements would help us to promote adaptive feelings, which would be better served, getting us into a better place. And that truly is important. Self-forgiveness is a whole other topic we'll probably get onto another day, but with guilt, I'm sure there was some guilt with my father too. I don't know exactly. He's a very kind of closed off person, so we don't really talk about it. He did ask me one day, it's over 10 years ago now, he did ask me one day, and I don't know why it came up, but he said, would it be as bad as it is if he was hit by a car and died? And without a second thought, I said, absolutely, it would make all the difference in the world. And my dad went, really? And I said, yeah. He goes, Well, why is that? And I said, because it wouldn't have been his choice. If you're in a car accident, that's not your choice, usually, you know what I mean? You spin out, you hit some black ice or whatever, that's not your choice. He chose to do this. He got the noose, he wrapped it around the beam, he threw it around his neck, he got a chair. Like, there's a lot that goes into it. And he went through with it. So that's entirely his choice. And I remember thinking, like, somebody failed him. We all failed him. Absolutely, we all failed him. Now, unfortunately, to ease my guilt, and this is definitely one of the things I do not recommend that you do. However, to ease my guilt, I don't even know how long my brother had been gone for, but it had been some time anyways. I decided one night when I was just furious with crying that I was going to write my dad a letter, what we have now termed my poison pen letters. I wrote him 28 pages of things that he never knew about, Brett, things that he wasn't there to see, things that weren't spoken to him, things that happened that he probably didn't even know of, and how, with what happened before Christmas between my dad and my brother, the hospital experience is what started that off. There's a few other things beyond that. That'll be another topic. But I blame my dad too. And to minimize my guilt, I wrote him a 28-page letter telling him everything that he should feel guilty for. We really haven't spoken since, and I do regret sending that. And I have tried to reach out to reestablish a connection with him. But this is where suicide is different. My grandfather died from diabetes. Completely his fault. He didn't follow the program. He never watched what he ate. He didn't do what he was supposed to do. He wasn't consistent with his insulin shots. He ate way too much sugar. He was constantly in a coma. He was having strokes left and center. None of us were responsible for that. Absolutely not. What my brother did, in my mind, was like, an accumulation of negative feelings, perceptions, or events that just stuck in his head. And the more he lived, the more those added up to the one day when, his cup was full and that was it. He was just done. He was done. Now, the second part of the guilt that I haven't told many people is, not right away, but probably about 2 years later, I kind of felt a bit of a relief that he had done that. He did have mental illnesses. We don't know what they were. They weren't diagnosed. He'd never go and see anybody. But his moods were sometimes rapid cycling at times, up, down, up, down. He was very aggressive. He was very violent. He very vindictive too. And that's, I don't know. Trying to deal with, putting it into light of that's who. It took me 18 years to go back and to remember this is who he was. That had nothing to do with me. And the things that I did may not have helped, but I don't think they hurt that much. So, that's that for the guilt. Big breath in. Small breath out. Anyways, thank you for listening. If you have any comments, please write them down. I love comments, as you know. Tap on the subscribe button, hit the notifying bell if you want to see when we're going to be posting some more. When I say we, I kind of mean me and the cat, and I don't know where she went, but that's the only two of us here. So, no, I don't see other people who don't exist. not anymore. Anyways, so thank you for joining us. I am going to get on to the shame one and a couple of those other stories that I really feel need to be told. If ever you feel like sharing your story with us, please contact me, and we will make some sort of an arrangement to get that done. My story obviously isn't the only one out there, and there's other people that I would love to hear how their stories go, and I can benefit from some of their coping skills, and I think we all could. So anyways, that's going to wrap it up for today, and I will see you back here very shortly. Thanks, guys.